Today we got this Lexus Is300, and this car was the first credible threat to the almighty BMW 3 Series. This is the first time a major manufacturer stopped talking about making the better BMW and actually set about to imitate it in order to improve on the original. Toyota sold this car as the Altezza in Japan, and then when they elected to bring it to the United States, they brought it over as a Lexus, available as a 4-door sedan and a 5-door sportback wagon, a little 5-door that nobody really bought. Today I'm driving a 2001 example. This car is a 4-door automatic. The first generation Is300 was introduced in 2001. It was sold in the States until 2004. It was brought here to take on the vaunted BMW 3 Series, and it did very well up to a point. And side note, you're going to be hearing me refer to the BMW 3 Series a lot because, let's face it, this car's designers were referring to the BMW 3 Series ad nauseum when they did this whole car. The exterior is just very, very similar to BMW 3 Series. It's got the long wheelbase, it's got the very short overhangs, big wheels and tires, and the car sits low. Even though it looks like this car has been lowered, that's actual ride height from factory. It's all very reminiscent of the 3 Series. I will give credit where it's due. Lexus invented the Altezza taillights, and the rest of the car world came around to copy it. You can still see them in cars nowadays, which is really incredible. Inside, the car was very, very un-Lexus-like. All the other Lexuses had padding everywhere, very soft surfaces, full leather seats, electroluminescent gauges that were only available automatic. The Is300, by comparison, it had hard surfaces. It had these tighter bucket seats that were, they were tighter for better cornering. They also had Alcantara in the middle, leather in the edges, a very noticeable shift knob. It was just very athletic. The car overall has a great look to it, a cohesive design, outside to inside. It just screams luxury sports. Now, another great thing about this first generation was the engine. It was the vaunted 2JZ engine, which, in case you didn't know, that's the same engine as the Toyota Supra Mark IV, which is legendary because of Fast and the Furious, obviously. Basically, you're getting the same engine mounted longitudinally in the car, connected to a 5-speed transmission, and it had a rear differential will live in its slip. Car had 4-wheel independent suspension. The template from the BMW 3 Series is followed along in all these specs, if not quite the soul of the BMW 3 Series. This car was very clinical, very surgical, like a Toyota product you would expect. This car was actually engineered by the same guy who engineered the compact Toyota Corolla, the AE86, which was the drifter's wet dream. It was a little inexpensive compact coupe, but it had fully independent suspension in the early 80s. That really well ahead of its time. The second generation Is300 was introduced in 2005, and it was sold in the States until 2012. Not quite as pure design as the first Is300, but more successful in other ways. The interior really became a Lexus, for better or worse, just more luxurious. In order to compete better with BMW, they switched to a V6, which allowed better packaging and different sizes of engine to match BMW's array of engines. They also introduced the ISF with a big stonking 5-liter V8, again to match BMW. Then they also introduced a hardtop convertible to, you guessed it, match BMW. Car got a little bit fatter, but the footprint didn't grow very much, so it went into better quality materials, better insulation. The car overall was better for it. The third generation IS was introduced in 2013. It's still for sale. So the current 3 Series that's also for sale, the F30, it's been roundly criticized for losing its identity. And if you think that the original BMW lost its identity, well, let me tell you, the imitation 3 Series lost its identity even more. This third generation is, I guess it's in a public bathroom staring at the mirror wondering how I got here all sticky and broke. The Lexus Is300, people. What were the competitors for the Is300 in the very early 2000s? Well, the benchmark obviously was a BMW 3 Series. Every time BMW came out with a new 3 Series, everybody was put on notice. You know, Lexus benchmarked it, and the steering, the suspension, the straight six, the rear wheel drive, the 50-50 weight balance, the short overhangs, the long wheelbase. Really, it was all based on the BMW 3 Series. Now, the BMW 3 Series was a little more expensive, not quite as reliable, but it just does everything a little bit better. But an E36 nowadays is still very sought after. The Lexus IS300, less so. Other competition would be the Mercedes C-Class, which at that time was a C230 4-cylinder, or a C300 or 320 6-cylinder. They were well built, but they were very unreliable cars, and they didn't look particularly good. The interiors, they were very well built interiors, very comfortable, but they lacked pizzazz. The materials were better than the IS300. Well, that's easy to say. Everybody would be the case, because the IS300, let's not forget about all the plastics, people. But the BMW 3 Series didn't have great plastics at that time either, so this is not unusual. Other competition was the Audi A4, which sold very well, not quite as reliable, not very reliable, but the parts were cheap, and the cars drove nicely enough. That 1.8 turbo engine was, ahead of its time with fuel economy, and they're very tunable engines. The cars look great inside and out, great styling, great interiors. Let's see, the Infiniti G20, have you even heard of it? I don't blame you, nobody has. The Saab 900, which not really a great car. That was already a General Motors product, and the interiors were nice enough. Styling was nice. Cars are very robust, very quick, great engine, not very reliable. The Volvo was the S40, really cool design. Volvo started to get come into its own with the Scandinavian interiors, and they were very very forward looking. They're still doing it, and they're pretty famous for it now. Those Volvos were pretty cool. They looked different. They were pretty quick. I think they came with like 250 horsepower, which was higher than the rest of the class at that time. So I don't know about reliability, parts, that kind of thing. The seats were comfortable, but nobody who was shopping for that Volvo or the Saab was seriously considering anything else, really, because they are brand specific people. The exterior of the IS300, it just fits like a well-tailored suit. That's what it looks like. It's got a longitudinal engine, and it's rear-wheel drive. The wheelbase is stretched out to the corners. It's got very short overhangs. When you look at it from the side, you can tell it's got that rear-wheel drive profile with a very long, elongated hood. Just very, very well designed. It has the short overhangs. It has a long wheelbase. It's the big wheels, big tires for back then, the 17 inchers, and it sits close to the ground. All the trim is blacked out. It's got that cute little antenna that was new back then. Cool little rear spoiler. Well, back then it was a big spoiler. The interior also carries that same great design theme. The instruments are inspired by a Japanese superbike of the era, one of those crotch rockets, with everything centered around one circle. The binnacle is just very similar to what a sport bike would have, which is just, sport bike doesn't have a lot of room for dials. And the interior is just very sparse. It improved upon the BMW by having this very large glass area with low windowsill. Almost reminds you of the 80s with Honda, where they would have these very, very low, small dashboards. Well, this car has it. And if you look at the entire, the design is just so cohesive, outside to inside. It just screams sport. And the look also looks expensive. It's just such a well done design. That inline six that we talked about earlier produced about 215 horsepower and 215 pounds of torque, which were decent numbers back then. Wasn't the fastest, it was not the slowest. It's feels kind of slow nowadays. The car was rated for 18 miles per gallon city, 23 highway. We only really ever saw 16 miles per gallon. So, how is it to drive this car? The acceleration back in the day was mid 7 seconds, 0 to 60. Frankly, this car never felt like it could do those numbers. It's never been the fastest car. That being said, the engine sounds fantastic. A straight six engine, you're always going to get a very good sound, and it's so smooth. The steering in this car is fantastic. It really is second only to the BMW of the era. It's telepathic. The steering wheel's just the right size. It's the right thickness. It's very quick. Turns lock to lock. I don't know the exact number, but it's very tossable. You feel the contours of the road completely, and it also manages to turn down the volume on that telepathy of steering. if that's a term, I don't know. Another great thing, this car I think has perfect weight distribution front to back, and the car is pretty low to the ground. All that being said about the handling, Toyota couldn't help themselves, and they made the damn thing understeer. So when you're taking a curve, instead of the rear end kind of getting playful on you, the front end wants to push. The front end is what loses the grip before anything else. Even going through these rough roads right now, I'm hoping that the microphone picks up just how smooth the car is. You feel the texture of the road perfectly clear, but it's just very well executed. The ride of the car it's kind of stiff. The suspension is very low on this car. The car's got 17s when 17s were big wheels, but the ride it's very well tuned, where the initial impact is absorbed very well and then it smooths out. That's tuning with a properly chosen shock absorbers. This car actually has the original shock absorbers, and they are holding up 15 years later. That's a testament to a low weight car and an owner that treats their car very, very well, very gently. And that's 60. It's not fast, I'm telling you. The owner of this Lexus bought this after a long and storied history of buying Saabs, and basically buying this Lexus became her atoning for her sins of Saab ownership. And I myself am a Saab apologist, but god damn it, those cars are unreliable. They hold up very well to abuse, but I mean, if you're in the shop every month, who cares about the fact that it's holding up? And if if you're constantly fixing different things for it. So basically the allure of Toyota reliability is what got her out of a Saab and into a Toyota product. And that was 15 years. That was this is a 2001. She bought this car in 2002. 16 years later, that reliability has held up tremendously. She said that this would be the last car she would buy. And, you know, the Toyota hasn't blinked. The Toyota has not blinked. It's going strong. In fact, the one in this equation who has blinked is the owner, who is now going to be replacing this car because, oddly enough, it doesn't have the infotainment system. They need they're getting older. They need park assist features that you don't get in this car. So lo and behold, it's a machine. This car is a machine, and it's being faulted for being a machine. It never blinked. Ooh, never blinked. What's been broken in this car? Very little, other than routine maintenance items. It's been the steering rack was rebuilt because of the poor Puerto Rico roads. It was rebuilt once, never had any trouble with it again. Can't say that about those Saabs, which was like almost a yearly thing with the steering racks. The water pump was recently replaced, and air conditioner needed a recharge. It still works fine. It just needed a recharge like 2 years ago, and it's freezing. It freezes your balls cold. It's fantastic. This is a car that I've liked since it came out. And a lot of the things that I liked originally still hold true. The styling, it just looks great. The stereo is excellent. The stereo is fantastic. It's an Nakamichi. Other things that I like about it are the engine it sounds great, and it's very, very smooth. The car is also very quiet. The doors close with a nice thud still after all these years. There's very good sound deadening in the doors and everywhere else. The tire thumb is muted. Alright, so that was a quick pull to 60, and it brings up things that I dislike about the car. Well, the engine might be great, but the transmission, it's a 5-speed automatic. It was, even back then, it was really, I think, behind the times in the programming. The shifts are, they're kind of like slurry because it has a torque converter. So it's like, and then it hits really hard, but there's that gap that, whoever you're running next to, they just walk away from this car. The transmission is hooked up to that cute little shifter with a chrome ball, and that's cool. The car is very lightweight, and the car is, the sheet metal is a little flimsy, the bumpers are a little flimsy. Overall, the fit and finish was great, but keeping it up is a little difficult. In the interior as well, the plastics are all over the place. They look really cool, but they can get scratched up. This car is in great shape, and you don't see that because it's been used gently. Overall, the proportions of the car, the look of the car inside and out, there's a timelessness to it. I keep coming back to it because it just looks so cool, and it's comfortable. And I'm a big guy, and I fit fine in the car. It's going to be remembered as a landmark Japanese car, I think. I love the car. So how is the Lexus IS300 going to be remembered? As a competitor to the BMW 3 Series, it fell so much short of the mark. That doesn't mean it wasn't a successful car. This was a great looking car, great looking sports sedan that drove like a Lexus, and there's really nothing wrong with that, as long as you know that that's what you're getting. Keeping these cars on the road is very inexpensive, and they are very inexpensive to purchase, unless you run into an example like this one that's just in fantastic shape. So if you like this video and you like the Lexus IS300, please hit the like button, and also consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. That would be tremendously helpful for me, and it'll also give you notifications every time I upload a video. Thank you so much.